Hello and welcome to this latest installment of Tones of the Hammer, and today I am with a super nice guy and super talented who does a little bit of everything in the music industry. He produces local artists and bigger artists, and he also works with one of Canada's biggest band as a sound and drum technician. So I want to introduce to you, if you don't know him already, Mr. Zach Gerber. Thank you so much for coming on. How's it going, mate?
Great, man. Thank you for having me.
No problem.
I've been looking forward to doing this.
Yeah, me too. We've had this in the books for so long.
It's been a little while, yeah.
Yeah, you're so busy on tour and everything.
It's
which we are going to get into all that sort of stuff. You know,
Yeah.
your touring that you've been doing recently. But Zach, for anybody that doesn't know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about how did you get into music? What's your, how did you get to where you are today?
Totally. So my name's Zach. I got into music. I was 14 years old when I got my first guitar and got into my first band. I'd been playing drums since I was maybe 10.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to learn music, start with drums, because learning rhythm is super important.
That's
a lot of
good point.
people undervalue rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think starting on drums is a great way to start learning music if you're thinking about it. So I started on drums. I taught myself guitar and a couple other instruments, and started playing in bands when I was a kid. I was in a really fun punk band that I loved called Last One Out. We just played pop punk tunes, and that was really, really cool. I played bass in a metal band. I played guitar and sang in kind of an emo rock band. But when I was 18 years old, I went to a studio in Toronto. It was the second record that I had done with my punk band, Last One Out. And I remember being in that studio and just thinking, this is the coolest thing you could possibly do. I just always want to be in the studio.
Yeah.
And I had been recording a little bit before that. My friend had an old iMac back before iMacs were skinny. Do you remember the old ones that were
I've
looked
seen
like
pictures of it
old
anyway.
tube televisions? Yeah. So we made GarageBand records on that thing that were just horrible.
How very punk of you, though, How very punk of you.
I've got the recording somewhere. It's the most ridiculous thing. The bass guitar would be panned all the way to the left. Why was that the move? We had no inkling of what we were doing. We had a 4-channel mixer that we would plug drums into and just spit a mono output into the interface, into the computer.
Hey,
and that was
how
our drum
some
track.
of the best music's made, though, sometimes, but we'll have to have a listen to it. And
I should see if I can dig up some of those tracks for you. They're priceless. They're so good.
Love to hear them.
So I started doing recording like that, but when I got to the studio in Toronto, I was like, oh my goodness, this is the coolest thing ever. And I was talking to the engineer at that studio, Anthony, and he's like, man, if you want to get into this, just buy Pro Tools and go for it. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, cool. So I bought Pro Tools. I started trying to take it a little bit more seriously. And shortly after that, this guy, Ian Blackwood, who was playing in a band at the time called The Artist Life, one of my favorite bands of all time. I was going to a bunch of Artist Life shows, and their singer Ian and I became friends just because I was always watching his band. I was just following them around obsessively.
That happens, right?
And he's like, hey, why don't you come out? I've got, a little studio in my basement. If you come help me out, I'll teach you everything I know. And so I started working with him in Mississauga and really starting to actually figure out what I was doing and build my chops. And shortly after that is when Walk Off the Earth blew up, which is what I'm doing now. And when Walk Off the Earth blew up, this guy Ian is Sarah's brother, Sarah from Walk Off the Earth.
Right, I see, yeah.
So when they blew up, he went on the first run of shows they ever did after they blew up, and he called me from Europe, and he's like, bro, I am too old to be on tour. I've done this for too long. Do you want to see the world?
Yeah, man.
And I was like, well, first I shit my pants.
That's the dream phone call.
And then I said, okay.
Yeah.
And I've been on tour with them now for 12 years.
Wow.
12 years. So I do that. I'm mixing front of house for them now and bouncing around and doing a whole bunch of odd jobs. And then when I'm at home, I do the studio thing. So that's kind of how I got into what I do.
Yeah, totally. Because so of course we met when you were coming and producing Daniel Roy, right? Yeah, down here at hereL, which is Tones of the Hammer HQ. And yeah, we always love whenever you guys are in the studio, Zach, it's not even like working really, It's just we're all just kind of playing, right?
I love that.
You know,
that's how I feel when I come in here. Like
Yeah.
I have a little project studio in Cambridge
Yeah.
that I love, and I love working
Yeah.
out of it, and I work out of home a lot, and all of those things are fantastic. But when I get to come in here, I get to play, because it's
Yeah.
like I get to put my hands on all like the plugins that I'm used to
Yeah,
using, right? And just
totally.
like do all of that stuff. So it is like playing. We have fun every time we come
I
in
love
here.
it. It's
Yeah.
always good fun. It's always good fun for sure. So in terms of, in terms of your job, we talk about just then being at the studio, and you're also doing front of house mixing.
Mm-hmm.
And just before we started rolling, we were talking about the pressures that must be totally different between studio and live. So for anybody that's watching that's not kind of like in the audio kind of world as such, why don't you tell us a little bit about the difference between coming into a studio and then kind of the pressures, like what can you expect in a day of the life of like a front of house mix engineer for Walk Off the Earth?
Yeah, the pressures are just different.
Yeah.
Both have their select pressures, and they're just different pressures. When you're in the studio, if there's a patch issue and you're having trouble getting a piece of gear going, it's not like the doors are going to open in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like, oh shit, like we got to work through this problem, or maybe we just use a different thing, or, those issues aren't as immediate and as concerning as they are in a live situation. In a live situation, especially on this last tour, we were out with an artist called Lindsay Sterling, who's absolutely incredible. She's a violinist. I wouldn't think when I first heard about it that 90 minutes of violin playing would be an interesting show.
Yeah.
I was the most wrong I could have ever been.
Nice.
Her show is fantastic. She's an amazing musician. And the production is just incredible. But when you're in a live scenario, especially when you're playing a direct support role, which is what we were playing, our total time on the stage to put all of our gear on stage and sound check was 1 hour. Wow. And to put it in perspective, when we headline, we take like sometimes 6 hours to do that.
Yeah.
So if you have an issue in the live world, it's like, okay, we have an issue, but there's also no time to fix it.
Yeah.
So oftentimes you defer issues to, the back end of sound check. You really have to prioritize your time because everything is so immediate. It's like, oh, the synthesizer isn't working. Okay, let's figure out why the synthesizer isn't working after sound check so that we can use the next 7 minutes that we have to actually put a couple songs in the PA so I can figure out what this arena sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you really have to make concessions and prioritize your time and just do the most important thing, and then try to catch up on all the other problems when you have a moment to breathe.
Wow, man.
So that's kind of like the live pressure. The studio pressure, the thing I find most about studio is the standard is entirely different.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you're working in the studio, especially with most of the music that I produce, the goal is basically for it to be pristine. I really want a full range of frequency if I'm working on a full mix. Obviously things like acoustic tracks or like stripped down tracks are different, but I want the full range of frequency, and I want everything to be working together and nothing to be on top of anything, and everything to pretty much be perfect. And sometimes, especially if you're sitting there mixing and like you're just like fighting the keyboard that's kind of stomping on the guitar that's now getting in the way of the vocal, and like all of those sorts of things that you're chasing around, you can spend hours and hours and hours and hours chasing that.
Yeah.
Whereas juxtaposed to the live world, if you're having a bad mix day at front of house,
It's just happening. You're just rolling with it.
It just happens. And then at the end of that set, that mix is over and you spill into a venue the next day and try again.
Fix it,
right?
yeah.
And so there's not as much pressure. It's kind of funny to say, but there's not as much pressure for the mix.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you're mixing on a PA system, usually things sound pretty cool.
Yeah, totally.
As long as you have like a few things taken care of.
There's a lot more breathing room with that kind of quality, right?
You know, it's not feeding back. It's loud. You have a full range system to work off of. You've got huge subs, huge tops. It's actually not that hard, in my opinion, to make that sound cool. At least at a base level. We could spill hours into the nuance of like trying to get every little thing in the mix perfect, but to like get the faders up and get the band into the PA, it's not that hard to make a giant PA system sound cool. Whereas when you're sitting in the studio, it can sometimes be hard to make that live feeling translate into the studio monitors.
Mix sort of thing,
Yeah.
I just love it, Zach. I just find that you're so modest about what you do. Is like, for anybody that this is the first time you're meeting Zach through this podcast. If you see the kind of shows that Zach is pulling off and doing the mix for, it is like I would literally have a mental breakdown doing this thing. So it blows my mind to see you talking about this in such a it's just like, we just kind of make things sound good in the stadium. I'm like, what? It blows my mind. And I've been waiting, like we said, I've been dying to interview you for so long now, and you've just come on tour. So where have you been recently on tour with Walk Off the Earth and other artists?
Yeah, so we did basically almost 2 months. We started off with one show in Red Deer, Alberta, which is a Walk Off the Earth show, and that was kind of on its own. And then we hopped from Red Deer to Salt Lake City and started a 6 and a bit week run with Lindsey Sterling.
Nice.
So we did Salt Lake City all the way down into Texas and did a few shows in Texas, and then went all the way across to Florida and hit like Georgia and not Arizona. I don't think we did a show in Arizona, but Arkansas on the way. Did a few shows in Florida, kind of worked up the East Coast into the Carolinas, all the way up into like New York, Boston, came across kind of through the Midwest, Philadelphia, Ohio, and then finished the tour all the way out in Minneapolis.
Yeah, what a great way.
So we kind of did like most of the way around the outside of the country.
Totally, yeah. Missed all the like Midwest sort of thing.
Yeah.
That must be as much as touring in Hollywood films and in people's eyes. It's so glamorous and amazing touring. It must come with its stresses and kind of like lulls of like, I just want to get back to the good old hammer sort of thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty stinky. I mean, you pile, all right. you pile a whole bunch of working people onto a bus at the end of the night, and there are showers in the venue, and if you're respectful to yourself and to the people around you, you shower at the end of your day. But your shoes don't go through the shower, and they get onto the bus too.
Yeah.
So how many people were on my bus? I think there were 9 people on my bus. And then about the same on the other bus. It was two buses for us. We had 2 buses. Lindsey Sterling had 3 buses. So it was a 5-bus tour. So, you pile a whole bunch of people onto the bus at the end of the night. It's crowded. It's kind of stinky.
Yeah.
You live with the people that you work with. And I like all of the people that I tour with, but when you work for, my typical work day on the road, especially when I'm tour managing.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Why don't you tell us like a day in the life of like what you do?
Yeah, so especially when I'm tour managing. So on this last tour, I was tour managing and I was mixing front of house, so 2 jobs. So I would wake up in the morning, usually about 8. I'd crawl out of my bunk into the front lounge of the bus. No one else would be up because I go to bed way sooner than anybody else. I'm very much a morning person, so I make myself a coffee in the front lounge and I sit down with my computer, and oftentimes the bus is still rolling. Like we're still driving to the next city, and I open up my computer and I just start doing emails. And over the course of the day, usually, 20, 30 emails pile up that I have to kind of look at. And usually like they're often quick responses like, hey, how late can we park the bus here at this venue? Like, what time are we able to roll out? And then you'll get a response to that and be like, okay, cool, I can roll out at that time.
Yeah, there's so much to think about, right?
There's
that, wow, yeah.
The logistics of getting, we were at the most 19 people in 2 tour buses that basically ran across America for 2 months. There's a lot of logistics involved in that. The buses, the hotels, all of the stuff in between. So I start my day with emails about 8:30. Usually by 9 o'clock, we're rolling into the next venue. That's usually what I planned for. I tried to leave the last venue at whatever hour it was that would get us to the next venue at about 9 o'clock. Once I get into the venue, I would put my computer away, go inside, eat breakfast. All these venues were catered, which is the hugest blessing because you don't have time to run out and grab food. That's ridiculous. So you go in, you eat breakfast. Usually shortly after breakfast, 10:30, I would get a call on the radio from Lindsay's team, and they would be like, we're ready to dump your trailer. All of our gear dumps into the venue. At that point, thankfully, I had enough staff with me on this tour that we would dump the trailer and I would leave the gear with them. And I would say, you guys set up the gear. I'm going to go back into the green room. I'm going to go back at emails. I'm going to make sure the band is okay. They sleep a lot later than I do. So usually by about 11, 12 o'clock, the band is waking up, rolling off of the bus. I'm bringing them into the venue, showing them where things are. Here's catering. Here's your green room. This is how you get to the stage, those sorts of things. Then by about noon, 1 o'clock, I'll eat lunch. Right after lunch, I then go to the stage where a lot of the gear is already kind of staged to go onto the stage. I would take all of my monitors and RF gear was in one rolling rack case. I would roll that rack case onto the stage, get it powered, tune all of the wireless frequencies, which is a whole job in and of itself. And make sure that that end of the snake was good. Once that end of the snake was good, I'd go to front of house, set up my front of house console. We toured with an amazing team of people. Lindsay's team is fantastic. So oftentimes by the time I would get to front of house, one of their staff had already set up my console because he was an absolute sweetheart. Man. Nick, I love you if you're watching this. So I'd go out to front of house, make sure that that console was good. We would usually sound check between 3 and 4. So 3 o'clock hits, then it's the mad dash because we only have an hour on stage to push all of our backline on stage, run all the cable, run all the power, make sure everything's plugged in. Then I'd run out to my front of house console, line check. Okay, everything's working. Cool. Bring the band onto stage. They come on, play 2-3 songs. I get to hear the PA, walk around the room a little bit, figure out how it's responding. And then 4 o'clock's a hard stop because Lindsay's going to come in right behind that and do her VIP meet and greet. So she needs the stage. So 3 to 4 is kind of like an intense push. And then by 4 o'clock, we come off deck. The band has to go to VIP. So I'd hand them off to our VIP coordinator. He'd take them to VIP. They do VIP. I'd go eat dinner. After dinner, they'd come back from VIP. I'd make sure they eat. Then it's into show mode. You know, once they eat, it's about hour-ish, hour and a half maybe to show. So I get them their wireless packs, like their in-ear packs. Make sure that they have what they need to do their show. We would do the show. It was, we were doing a 50-minute set. So we do a 50-minute set, get them off deck, into the green room, load out the show into the trailer. And then from there, the intense part of the day is done. But I'm still kind of like... We usually didn't leave the venue until about 1 o'clock in the morning. Wow, Mom. So especially at the front half of the tour, I was up with the band, making sure they had what they need, making sure everyone's taken care of. If they wanted show or after show food, I would order them food, like Uber Eats food to the venue, make sure that they have what they need, and then crawl into the bus, go to bed, do it all again the next day.
Wow, man. What a day. Like you said, like you was talking about time management and stuff, there is no room for like not knowing what is going off at any given moment of your day, right? Because it's like, you know, like something as little as you say, oh, I forgot to give a wireless pack to so and so. You know, it's like, oh my, it's a disaster, right? You know, it's like,
and those are the different pressures between like live in the studio. Yeah. In the studio, if it's like, oh shoot, I forgot to patch that kick drum, you just run out and you patch the kick drum. If you don't have the kick drum patched during the show and they go on and now it's the show and now you don't have a kick drum, it's like, okay, well, what are my options? Do I leave the console and go patch the kick drum? Do I yell at them over my talkback mic and get someone to patch the kick drum for me? Yeah. Is it a problem with the microphone? Maybe I did patch it. You know, there's way less room for error. You have to be very detailed and very conscious of all of the little things that put together a production that can play in an arena.
Yeah, totally. It's a total different scale to like your local band kind of local band gigs. Wow, like that day alone has just stressed me out just listening to that day. You know.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, 8 o'clock till 1 o'clock. What is that? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1. That's like 17 hours.
Yeah, totally.
And that's on the longer side, but minimum my days were 14 hours. We were pretty much on all day. And the hardest thing about tour management is that at any point, any given problem could come up, and usually you have some amount of involvement in that problem. So whether that's a band member saying, hey, I don't have this in the green room, can you make sure that this comes? Or if there's a problem with the VIP program, I might have to get pulled in to create a solution there. Or you also play the liaison between your team and the band that you're touring with. So if Lindsay's team needed something from us, they would come to me. And so, there were 19 people on the road with us. Lindsay's team had 34, I want to say, that she was touring with. And you're kind of the buffer between those two teams. So that's a lot of people that you're on call for at pretty much any time. And so it becomes a never ending cycle of not like nothing bad happened on this tour, but as soon as something does happen, you're involved. Yeah. And so you're just always on for that amount of time.
You're like the tour daddy then. You're in charge. Yeah,
for sure.
In charge of like
for
everyone. Wowzers, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so wild, It's so wild. I think it's the pressures are totally different. And although you have been touring with like Walk Off now for like what 10 12 years or so.
Yeah.
So I guess really that you're always out of town. What's your experience with like Hamilton's local music scene at all? Is it kind of something that I imagine it's tough to find time to know what the hell's going off with Hamilton, Southern Ontario's kind of, scene?
I mean, I hear about it from we have a guy who's out working with us. His name's Doug. He's a Hamilton guy. He's a Hamilton steel player. And he's fantastic, and he plays more gigs than anyone I know.
Nice.
Like he'll, I'll call him up and be like, "Hey, like, are you available to like come do this thing at the warehouse? Like, we need to work on this gear." And he's like, "Sorry, man, I can't. I have 4 gigs that day and 2 the next morning."
Oh, nice.
Like, how do you do that, bro? So I hear about like the music scene around here from him. He loves it here. I don't get out here too much. I live in Woodstock.
Yeah.
I grew up in Cambridge. I came out here and played a bunch when I was younger, when I was still in bands.
Yeah.
I played at the Casbah a bunch. I played at Corktown.
Yeah.
Corktown's a really great spot. I hear it's gotten quite a bit better too. I haven't been back in a little while.
There's a whole lot of music on there. There's a whole lot of different diverse music as well, everything from jazz night on Wednesday. There's like East Coast music on Thursdays and Fridays, Irish nights on Tuesdays, and then it can be anything from a hard rock band to a party jam band sort of thing on a Saturday. So there's some cool stuff happening.
Yeah, it's good to see. I feel like since I was a kid, like when I was 18 years old, 17, 18 years old, playing in a band, I felt like there were tons of places to play, and the people around me were like at my high school. There were a bunch of bands at my high school, and we would all play gigs on the weekend. Or I had friends from another high school, and there was a whole bunch of bands there too. I don't necessarily know if it's like that these days.
Yeah,
I feel like the landscape has changed, and I'm not sure why that is.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's a result of what is kind of modern music, because there's a lot more. Like if you listen to the radio right now, there's a lot more artist-oriented music, which is singular, whereas the era that I grew up in, the bands that I looked up to, like Blink-182, Sum 41, bands like that, they were bands. You got together with your friends and you played music. And like bands like that aren't as popular these days, and maybe that's why things are a little more individual.
That's interesting you say that, because that seems to be the common kind of discussion here on Tones of the Hammer, is that when I ask artists about local scenes, that's exactly what they say a lot of the time, is that years ago you had more venues, like you're saying, but also there was more like band culture rather than like you said, this artist culture of like somebody on TikTok's making music and stuff like that. So I imagine, but even like the guys from Walk Off the Earth though, that's where their whole start from YouTube, that whole kind of birth of this whole, social media platform being able to, that's kind of, I imagine with them being a big band now, a lot of people forget that's how they started their career, right?
Yeah, and I think that changes the psychology of what a young artist thinks about when they're trying to break their music, right?
Yeah.
Because music is broken online now. Like, gone are the days of, I mean, not gone entirely. There is, I suppose, some amount of value to touring, but like, you don't build your brand as an artist anymore by hitting the same town twice a year for 4 years, right? You build it by being in the face of people online, and you can do that more individually, which is great. If you look at it from the perspective of accessibility, it's highly accessible. which is awesome because that's empowering to young musicians. But I do, and maybe this is just the old dog in me talking, but I do worry about there's so many intangibles that happen when you get into a room with other people who also love music. Even just the music aside, the social aspect of doing that. Like 100%. some of my best friends and some of the best memories I made as a younger man was getting into the jam hall with my buddies and like pouring our life into art, like the things that were happening around us and our passions, and collaborating with other people on like, if you call a spade, like what we were feeling at the time. We were crafting art out of our feelings and doing that with people around us. Yeah. And that does a different thing to you than I filmed this TikTok in my bedroom and put it online.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm not trying to shit on that. I'm really not. Yeah. Because I mean, so many people have created so many amazing opportunities doing that, and that's amazing. There's a mojo that happens when you get into the room with other people and you get it out of your own head into an environment where there's a group of people working on it. And I would even argue as a producer, as someone who produces music, I wouldn't even call it subjective. I would say objectively, if you were working with other people who work on music, having the influence of ideas that didn't come from you is probably going to make your music better. Yeah. 100%. Anytime I wrote something, it always got better when I brought it to my band. And maybe if you're a musician and you feel the opposite about that, maybe you have the wrong band. We could kind of argue that.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
But even just in terms of, like, you're never going to think of everything.
Yeah,
and
that's
sometimes
great way to put it.
Sometimes even if you are not stuck, even if you're very confident and you're like, I feel like it should go this direction, and someone else plays a different chord and you're just like, shit.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even hear that. And it changes your vocal melody. And now all of a sudden it's better. That's why bands hire producers.
Yeah.
They hire a third party to come in and help them
contribute. Yeah.
Help them craft their music into a more consumable package.
Yeah, totally, right. And you see that a lot in the studio with collaborating, right? You know, it's like it's the prime example. Just leaving egos at the door. We said this on the last episode of like leaving egos at the door. Can be a big thing, but I imagine, a lot of the time you're working with people that you really love, and you can kind of manage in that sort of way, you know, because artists do take managing, right? You know. Yeah, you still have to choose to check your ego because it can. Especially because we're making art, right? Yeah. So when you're making art, you have an emotional connection to what you're making. And when someone steps in and says, I don't like this portion of your emotion, you're like, oh, but I do. Yeah, exactly, right. But if you listen, again, if you can get your head above that and you can listen to other people, I think your product's going to be better. I really do believe that. 100%. There's that beauty in collaborating. I think you see that in the studio more than anywhere, right? You know, it's like you said, that one person could totally make a song by just contributing that little idea, you know, and stepping in and taking that idea, you know, right? Yeah. You touched on earlier about how many hours in a day that you work, right? Which is mind blowing to I think to anyone, you know. It's a lot of work, a lot of stuff to manage, right? And you're in a cool place in your career right now, you know. I love listening to all your stories of what's going on and where you've been and stuff. Thanks, so man. How would you say if you're advising someone that's trying to get into this sort of industry, even not necessarily even in just the Southern Ontario area, but even around the world, what would you say? What advice would you give to your younger self to, like, you know, from your experience, what has, you know, to get to the place where you are is what would you say to people to advise them? I was actually anticipating this question. So I was thinking about it on the drive over. And I was thinking about my younger self and the things that I did to kind of get me in the door, to get me into the positions that I'm in. Because it sounds like you just said yes and just went, you know, rolled with the, Yeah, but if you think about it, so flat out, the thing that has propelled my career more than anything else is the opportunity that I've had with Walk Off the Earth. Over the 12 years that I've been with them, I've gleaned
so much professional experience and bumped shoulders with so many people. And it's obviously been, for my career, the biggest blessing that I've received. So how did I get there? I interned at some, seemingly random guy's studio. So my advice to younger people would be show up and be useful. And if you can do those two things, doors are going to open up for you.
Yeah.
And I did that. I loved what I was doing when I was 18, and I had no problem going out for little or no money and just hanging around. I just wanted to be in the environment. I wanted to show up. I wanted to learn. And if you can show up and you can make other people's lives easier and show a willingness to learn and a hunger for learning, you're going to get opportunities. They might not come right away because you might not be sitting in the correct circle, but if you show up to enough circles, something's going to click for you. And now from the other side of the perspective, now that I'm sitting in a position of, experience within the industry, and I'm now guiding a younger team, it's the individuals that show up and are hungry and want to learn and want to take on additional responsibility and want to get better that I will hand all of the opportunity to, because they have a responsibility and a sense of wanting to take on new challenges. And if you can do that, you're going to get work.
Yeah.
And that it's actually pretty simple to do. You don't need a pre-existing skill set. If you can just show up and be useful and be willing to learn and help, in this scenario of doing shows, like if you show up and you carry gear around and then stand beside the guy mixing, eventually he's going to be like, look at this thing. This is how you do this. Yeah. Because we're all the same. We love talking about what we do because we love doing it, right?
Yeah.
And you can build relationship there and just start gleaning knowledge. Yeah. So just show up and be useful.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's great advice. I think in the music industry, a lot of the time, it is so easy to give up because it's such a, you have to give a lot more than you get out of it a lot of the time, Mm-hmm. And like you said, the 14-hour days and everything, I think they're all worth it if you're so, you can't, I think you can't be in this industry unless you're totally passionate, it's your total life, right? Which it obviously is with your, yourself and a lot of other people that come on the podcast and stuff like that,
Yeah.
It's so great to hear. So on tour, so I imagine you said that on tour there's a lot. Is it tend to be like younger people on these teams that you work with then?
Recently, the kind of the new form of the Walk Off the Earth crew is a lot of younger guys now.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Which is
I always got the impression that these tours, it used to be like, you always imagine it's some old dude with a beard and grey hair sort of thing,
I think there are tours like that, but I'm never on them.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even Lindsay's team, like her tour manager's got to be, like late 30s.
Right.
Like I don't think I've ever toured with anyone over 50.
Yeah. Wow, that blows my mind. That totally blows my... I don't know if I've just seen rock bands my whole life, which is like I say, the guy with the beard and the grey hair sort of thing. But
the cranky old sound guy with the
nobody over 50 on.
No, I don't think so. It's a lot of young people because it's a very laborious job. It's
even to be away is in its own right is a lot. It's a lot of commitment, right?
Yeah, you miss a lot of things. You have to be comfortable missing a lot of things. You miss birthdays. Sometimes you miss funerals. Mm-hmm. You just it's the nature of the beast, but it's really good when you get to show up every day to an amphitheater or
and, people.
In my case, like I show up to this beautiful PA every night because they were touring with an L Acoustics PA. Nice. You show up to this beautiful PA every night and you get to do a mix for thousands of people. Like, how can you not be obsessed with that?
And that must be so insane. There's a thing when they say artists are on there's no feeling like being and performing on the stage, but there must be no feeling like it when you're in the sound booth surrounded by all these people that are jumping around too. And you're thinking, I'm making this sound pretty good, and people are vibing this. They're feeling that kick drum, and they're jumping to it. It must be like, it's just like being on stage, but without everybody looking at you, sort of thing, right?
It's in my opinion, it's pretty much the exact same thing.
Yeah.
They are expressing their craft and their art form, And for me, mixing is my craft and my art form,
Yeah.
right? I joke around all the time when I'm explaining what I do to musicians. I say, well, you got really good at guitar
Yeah.
and you practiced guitar. I got really good at Pro Tools.
Yeah, totally, man. Yeah,
And
that's it, man.
that's how I express my art form.
Yeah.
And so you synergize with the band when you do that, and it's really fun being on a tour because you shorten like the feedback loop of everything, right?
Yeah.
So you do a show, and then you sit down after the show on the bus with the band, and you're like, well, how was that one? Oh, this happened. I didn't feel good about this. Or what about you? What did you feel in the mix? So, well, when you played the bass in this verse, I felt like it stomped on this thing over here. And it becomes this collaborative thing really quickly. That's really, really fun, that I also really, really enjoy. And I mean, just to be frank, the adrenaline rush of doing a show like that
I can imagine.
every night, it's you forget when you're in it. Being on tour is like this weird little bubble.
Yeah.
Everything else kind of like fades away, and you're just kind of in this bubble of people who have normalized doing what you do, even though it's not
100%,
normal.
yeah.
And you just get this huge adrenaline kick every night from the show, and it's so much fun.
Yeah,
It's
I can
so much
imagine.
fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. I got that experience of touring a little bit because you're working on cruise ships. If I came to Canada,
Yeah,
so that's
yeah.
exactly what we always say. It's kind of that bubble of like your friends, and it's hard to in a way it's hard to explain to anybody outside of the bubble what life's like, right? When you're in that sort of situation,
It becomes very normalized.
Yeah, that's the
like
thing.
I would walk out to front of house, and Lindsay's front of house engineer Sage, who is an absolute rock star. Her mix is so good.
Yeah.
I'd walk out and be like, "Oh, how's your day?" And she'd be like, "Oh, yeah, same as yesterday."
Yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, it's like you have a almost $1 million PA at your fingertips,
Yeah.
set up in an arena, and you're about to do a show for thousands of people, and it's
Totally.
like, it's the same as yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't quite like my kick drum today. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Oh God, and that's what. Again, I've said it again, Zach. I love how down to earth you are about all this sort of stuff. It's it's mind blowing for us mere mortals here in the Hammer sort of thing. I love it. So you were talking about just then. Again, we talked about producing. You're producing stuff, and you also mentioned you like some of your pop punk from like the early 2000s, late 90s sort of thing.
I grew up on that stuff.
Yeah, totally. So what I was gonna say, what would you say is one your music inspirations, but also when you're producing, what's the kind of styles that you go for with producing? Is there any particular producers that you really love and like to take off?
I feel like I've done a fairly aggressive switch recently. So I grew up on the pop punk thing. I got plugged into pop punk when I can't remember how old I was. I feel like this is a quintessentially Canadian story. It would be like it was my responsibility as a kid to shovel the snow on my driveway, right? So I'd build up really as high as I could, snowbanks on the sides of my driveway. And then I would invite my friend over, and we would play like road hockey on my driveway and just like crush each other into the snowbanks as hard as possible.
Yeah.
But he would bring over, this is definitely dating how old I am. He would bring over his boom box with like Sum 41 and Blink 182 CDs.
Yeah.
And we would play these CDs and just like run each other into snowbanks and then sometimes shoot the ball at the net.
Nice. Oh
And
my
so-
God, that sounds so much fun, man.
It was so fun. And so that's kind of how I got plugged into Sum 41 and Blink 182. Sum 41 more. I really liked Sum 41 when I was playing hockey like that. And then when I went to high school, one of my best friends, Brad, I told him I really liked Sum 41. He's like, no. Blink 182 is better. I was like, no, I'm pretty sure I like Sum 41. And he came to school the next day with every Blink 182 CD that was out. And he's like, just listen to them. They're better. And so I grew up on all those bands. I really liked All Time Low.
Yeah.
When All Time Low put out their first couple records. And so I was really into that. And then I got into metal. So when I was first producing, I was listening to a lot of metalcore, like The Devil Wears Prada and stuff like that. And so the guy on top of the industry at that time was Joey Sturgis.
Yeah.
He was doing all of those records and had like a specific sound that I really, really liked. Nowadays, I think there's I don't know how to say his last name, so I'm probably going to say it long, but do you know who Sam Guyana is?
No, I can't
He's
say
a
I
producer out of Toronto, and he's doing all of those, like, whatever the modern version of pop punk is now.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like shoegazy,
Yeah.
like emo rock,
Yeah.
punk bands, that sort of thing, and like new wave pop punk. He's doing a lot of those bands, and his productions are like I wish I could do that. I don't know what he's doing that I'm not doing, but I would love to sit down with him and find out, because
100%.
he makes bands sound so good.
Yeah.
So I really like his productions, but the switch that I was talking about is I love those bands because I grew up listening to those bands, but I don't really listen to them that much anymore. I've kind of done a transition into, I did like the Chris Stapleton country thing for a while, which was like my gateway drug. And then I did the very produced like Morgan Wallen country thing. And then I fell into Zach Brown, or not Zach Brown. Zach Brown's amazing, but Zach Bryan.
Brian, yeah.
And I just like can't get out of the Zach Bryan hole.
Yeah, they're so crazy, those records, because it's like, you on first listen to them, I didn't even think about the production of it. Then you listen, and it's like, in a way, it sounds like that they've just like put whatever mic in front of whatever instrument and done it and let it out, but it sounds great. There's no like sonic, I'd say, quality to it in a way, but it's like,
it's very rough around the edges.
Yeah, but it sounds great.
He put a new record out, and I recognize in myself, it takes me a very long time to come around to new music, because I'm very protective of the old music. So he's got a new record out. I'm patiently waiting for myself to fall in love with it. I hope that I do. I haven't yet. But the record he put out before this one is just self-titled. It's just Zach Bryan. I would confidently say is my favorite record out of the last 10 years.
Oh, nice. Wow, yeah.
Both in terms of like songwriting and in terms of production.
Yeah.
And the production, I don't know the story behind the record, but it's so grimy. Grimy in like a folky sense.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's exactly how I put it.
Like analog distortion, tape hiss.
Yeah.
There's one song in particular that I really like where I don't think it was intentional, but the acoustic guitar sound just changes midway through the song. It sounds like, I don't know if like they put a comp together, and when they punched in the second comp, he was sitting in a different spot in the room or whatever, but it in a very pronounced way gets darker.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's rough around the edges, and it's gruff, and it's messy, and so creative, and the songs.
And again, in the producer world, that's a big no-no to comp in, like, that's kind of what everybody's taught in a way.
And that's what it's kind of not. It's kind of naughty.
Exactly.
It's like, you're just like you were just like, oh no, we're gonna print
whatever
that.
the fuck you want.
Yeah, we're gonna it changed. Yeah, fuck it. We're gonna print it.
Such a cool style.
And
right?
I love that, because I even said this about myself earlier. Like, when I produce, I'm shooting for pristine.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I want to do. I want pristine, pretty much everything. And the Zach Bryan record is kind of like the polar opposite of that.
Yeah.
It is pristine because it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. It's just like a lot of what happens could be considered in my world, and kind of the circle that I run in, mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, that vocal clearly clipped that preamp and blew up, and you printed it.
Yeah.
There's like an obscene amount of tape hiss, and you printed it. Like, have you ever heard of Isotope RX? Like, you didn't denoise that, but that's not the point of that record.
Yeah, exactly.
They're shooting for a different thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because of that I love it so much, or if it's the songs or whatever it is. Also, the first time I ever listened all the way through that record was on tour, and it was maybe my favorite night of all time on tour.
Yeah.
It was last year. I went to Germany early to prep for a European tour. I had to go to like a warehouse to like put together a whole bunch of gear, like get backline ready. We had a whole bunch of rentals that I had to like make ready to go on the road with us. And I went out there by myself, and I spent, I think, 3 days in Germany by myself. And then I loaded up all the gear into the trailer, and I got on the tour bus, and I was the only person on the tour bus, because we were driving from one city in Germany to a different city in Germany to start the tour. And we started in France, and I was meeting everyone else in Paris. So I drove from Germany to Paris on the tour bus by myself, and I just put on this record, and I listened to it on the bus by myself.
Best way to listen to it, right? In your
and
space.
and it was It's the best. I think it's my favorite tour memory of all time.
Nice.
It was, and maybe that's why the record's so special to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure it's a synergy of multiple things.
Yeah.
But I cannot say enough good things about that
Yeah.
record. I think it's the most creative and cool and interesting record that's been put out in a very long time.
Yeah, well, he's got, he's not short of fans 100%, Zach, Zach Bryan for sure. And again, it comes back to that, what you were saying about collaborating in a way, is the fact of, again, like you say, you shoot in the studio for everything to be so pristine, and you listen to that and you think, oh, well, maybe that's, for the right artist, when does it all really matter what we're kind of taught,
Yeah, for sure. I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
I think about that all the time. And it's hard as the producer to let it be that because you're like, ooh.
Yeah.
Because this is wrong. It's like, oh, that's noisy.
And also I think there's a big thing in, especially the audio world, there seems to be a big thing of like, if an engineer or a producer seem to be doing something like that, letting a vocal clip or letting a acoustic, do whatever it's doing, changing it, comping it out. There's a lot of, I think, I wouldn't say ego, but there's always, it seems in the audio world, there's always somebody that's going to comment and say, oh, this guy doesn't have a clue what he's doing, or this guy, like, quite clearly is not good at what he's doing, sort of thing, So I think
you made a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really hard sometimes to maybe go down that road unless you're fully confident that you've got an epic sounding record, Maybe we all need to be a bit braver with these kind of, mistakes. I love producer I love is Dave Cobb, who did a lot of like Stapleton, Sturgill Simpson, all that.
Yeah.
And he's all about the capturing the performance and, like I said, leaving mistakes in there. It's all part of that beautiful sound of a band, and it's I love that. And yeah, sometimes I think you have to let your insecurities go in the studio 100%.
You have to do something that's scary.
Yeah, totally.
If I think about my life and all of the things that I've done that have mattered to me the most, every single one of them scared the shit out of me. Every one of them. All of the things that I look back, like, I don't know, saying yes in that first scenario to going out on tour with Walk Off the Earth, or taking the position of front of house, knowing that like I'm going to have to step into arena shows and like I don't really have any business stepping into, like, who am I can't mix arenas. Like you tell yourself all these stories about what you can't do, and if you just do those things even though you are scared, you find out that doing scary things ends up being the best things that you do.
100%,
And I think it's a good thing to remember to just allow yourself to be like, I feel uncomfortable with this. Why don't we just lean into it?
100%. And and I think everybody that's got anywhere in life has always been like, mistake. You never grow without making mistakes. I think everybody that's been successful, whether that's like in business, whether it's in music or whatever, people who are successful in finance, for example, they've always gone, you hear stories from people, they've always gone bankrupt at least once in their life, or they've always lost everything and, took a risk and it's gone wrong, sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's a limiting belief when you're at the beginning of a journey that you're supposed to execute that journey without making mistakes. Because if you're stepping into something new and the standard you're giving yourself is, okay, I have to do this new thing without making any mistakes, you're an idiot.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a mentor tell me once when I was young, and I try to tell this to young people now too. He said, what is the difference between me and you? Do you know? And this is right when I was starting out in touring and doing all of that. I was like, I don't know, what is the difference? He's like, I've made way more mistakes than you.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's great.
That's it, because that's how you learn, right?
Yeah.
You just have to be comfortable doing uncomfortable things, and you have to be comfortable making mistakes and failing at things.
You got to learn as you go, right? And like you say, it's I forgot the saying. I'm sure it's a Richard Branson saying or something, where exactly like you say. If somebody asks you to do something you don't know how to do it, just say yes and learn as make mistakes and learn as you go, right? 100%. That's how you get into those rooms, the right rooms. Right?
Exactly. You can't expect yourself to move forward without willfully and consciously adopting discomfort.
Yeah.
In fact, if you follow the discomfort, that's where you're getting better.
Yeah, that's where you're getting better.
You have to follow the discomfort around, and if you find yourself getting comfortable, it's time to take on a new challenge.
Yeah. Great advice for anybody out there that's looking to You know, in any career, like we said, you know, in any career, just go for it. You know, I think that's the main thing. So that's enough shop talk, anyway, Zach. So where's the favorite place that you've traveled to while you've been on tour?
That's such a tough question.
There's some tasty food in France, right? You know.
Yeah, they've got great bread.
Yeah, man, croissants, right? Oh.
I don't really eat bread here. It hurts my tummy.
Yeah.
But European bread,
it's that fresh baked stuff, right? You know,
and I think I don't know if the UK's like this, but anywhere on the mainland Europe, their bread, most of their breads are super hard.
Yes.
You get super soft breads here. Yeah. And I'm not a baker or a scientist. I don't know the difference, but the hard bread doesn't hurt my tummy and the soft bread hurts my tummy.
Like sourdoughs and things like that,
Yeah.
you mean? Yeah. They're so nice. A fresh baked sourdough, man, is just out of this world, you know?
It's so good.
Yeah, I love it.
I really do. I like Western Europe, but I actually prefer Eastern Europe.
All right, okay.
When you get into Eastern Europe, the people get a little gruffer.
Yeah.
The culture changes.
Totally.
The mentality changes a little bit. It's just a little. I've never found a good word to describe it, but I like the people there.
Yeah.
They're just a little more fortified.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, down to earth as well, I imagine.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
I loved going to Australia.
Yeah.
I loved going to Australia. I have a friend who lives. I don't know where. I barely see her anymore, but I don't know exactly where she lives now. But she used to live in Sydney. And I was I flew into a tour in Australia, and I was doing a show in Sydney the next day, and I was down at the Opera House.
Oh, nice. Yeah, beautiful.
And she's like, "Oh, the ferries are right there. Hop on this number ferry, get off at the third stop. It's like a water ferry, right? Get off at the third stop, and I'm working at the first bar on the left when you get off the dock." And so I went over there and I met her, and we ended up in this little beach town called Manly. And she took me through the town. It's like this beautiful, like kind of quaint cobblestone town with all these like cool restaurants and bars. Yeah. And then it's right on the ocean. And she took me down to the beach at night, and we just watched the waves come in. And it's
stunning.
One of my favorite places I've ever been.
It's a beautiful country. I love Sydney, yeah.
Yeah. Have you been?
Yeah, I've been to Sydney, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Only kind of like around the centre, the Opera House, all that kind of, the centre. Mm-hmm. It was always, we used to dock there. It's where like when we did cruises, we'd start on Sydney, basically, when we were in Australia.
Right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. I love Australians, and just
they're so fun.
They're so fun.
They're
man.
so fun.
And again, like you said, down to earth as well.
Yeah,
you know,
very, very relaxed, friendly, and they always just seem to be primed for a good time. They're like, "Oh, you would like to have fun?
Yeah,
me too. Let's do that."
I feel that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're great people.
Amazing coffee as well.
Yes, great coffee. Great coffee. Yeah. And I guess the other place I would say that's my favorite place that I've been to is I've never done a show there, but Norway. Oh, so at the end of my European tour last year, my wife came out and met me, and we went to Norway with two of our friends and stayed at a little cabin kind of tucked away in the mountains with like a hot tub, but the hot tub was heated by a fireplace. I've never seen it before.
Great, yeah.
It was it was wild, and we just sat in the hot tub and had drinks on the mountain. And I like, I'm not a city person.
Yeah,
I like quiet, kind of like expansive, desolate places. That's my speed.
Well, I imagine when you're on tour all the time and just like everything's a million miles an hour, that's all you want to do, right? Is just chill out and being quiet, basically, when no one's bothering you.
It's wild. You don't even realize how sensory overload what you're doing is until you come home and you sit on your couch and you're just like,
what am I doing? Where am I?
What was that?
Yeah.
Because you're just always on, always going.
Yeah.
And then you come home. I mean, that's one of the reasons I like being outside so much. That's one of the, like when I come home from tour, I like going outside. I like sitting in the forest and just like communing with nature.
Yeah.
And I just like listening to the sound of nothing.
Yeah, totally. I imagine, because it's like, and again, the places where you're touring, they're all these big cities and big towns.
You just go from city to city to city to city, and every day is thousands of people. Not that you're interacting with those people necessarily, but you're always
like
in
you said,
busy rooms.
Sensory overload, right?
And you don't. It's like kind of like the frog in the boiling pot, right? You don't even know that it's happening to you until you step out of it, and you're like, wow. I mean, again, I'm not a scientist, but I feel like it's fatiguing on your nervous system just because it's so much all the time. And
High strung, like,
you do notice when you come home from tour, it takes me, I often get sick when I come home from tour. It's like my body's held on for so long to not get sick. And then I come home and I sit on my couch and it's like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
And then I get sick. And then I also like, even just emotionally, like you come home and you feel weird for a few days because it's like, I think you kind of get hooked on the adrenaline rush of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then the chemical balance of your body changes when you're not constantly being overloaded like that. And it takes you a few days to reset and kind of get like redialed into what normal life feels like.
Yeah.
But I do really like coming home. I like being home. I like being on the road, but I like being home and I like being with my wife and I like going outside and looking at trees and
big balance of big balance of the extremes.
It's the yin to my yang.
Yeah, totally. We just talked about touring and things. When's the next time you're off traveling on your next tour then?
Friday, actually, which is in 4 days.
Oh, we just sneak this in perfect time then. I'm good to it.
I leave just for 3 days to PEI with an artist called Lolo, which is super fun. She's like new wave pop punk, and because I grew up on pop punk, it's so sick getting to work with her. Because she's just like plugged into that scene, and you get to hear a bunch of punk bands again, which is fun. Right. So I go to PEI with her. We're doing a festival out there, so I'll just be gone 3 days, and then I come home from that, and Walk Off has one show in Kingston. I think it's technically considered a private gig because it's for a university. Queens, I think, is in Kingston. I think it's for Queens. So we have a gig in Kingston, and then October 3rd, I fly to Europe, and I'll do Europe with Walk Off the Earth until the 24th of October, at which point I'll jump directly from the Walk Off tour to the Lolo tour because she's doing a European tour, finish out her tour, come home November 4th. I'm home for 10 days, and then I leave November 14th for a month across Canada with Lolo.
Wow.
And then I'll get home, I think, December 18th, and that'll be it for the year for me.
Wow, so we'll see you at Christmas then,
See you at Christmas,
oh my God, Zach,
I'm sure I'll be back in January with some band to twist knobs with.
100%, dude, 100%. But it sounds like you're used to it now after 12 years. You're obviously enjoying it if it's after 12 years, right?
I love it.
Yeah.
I sometimes ask myself why I love it so much because it's kind of also wild and like really hard and weird, and you're away for a long time. But I love doing it.
How can you not? Yeah,
I love doing it. There's something. I don't know. There's also here's another thing. When I'm at home, I have so many focus, like so many places I should be and can be putting my focus. I'm often handling 2 or 3 studio clients at a time. I'm getting ready to do shows, so I'm advancing shows.
Yeah.
I'm, trying to do things at home. I've got family things to pay attention to. When I go out on the road, I basically worry about 2 things. It's like, I got to do the show, I got to do the tour, and I got to call my wife.
Yeah.
And it kind of simplifies my workflow in my life because there's really only time to focus on a couple things. And it's kind of nice to just drop into, okay, we're here. We're just doing this for 60 days or whatever it happens to be, you know?
Yeah, some people have the 9 to 5. You have the 8 till 1 a.m.
8 till 1.
Right, you know?
And it's not the one you're thinking about. It's the other one.
Yeah. It's AM, not PM. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. They're not all like that, but sometimes the days get long.
Yeah, well, it sounds fun, honestly. I love it. It's always a pleasure to listen to you, what you've been up to, Zach, and stuff. Thank you so much for coming down again. I know you're away in 3. I didn't realize you were away in 3 days, so I much appreciate your time. And for anybody that's watching, where can we follow you on Insta and all that sort of
Sounds
stuff?
like Zach.
Sounds like Zach.
So I haven't done it yet, but follow me there. A project that I'm launching in the new year. We talked briefly about it, but a project I'm launching in the new year is I'm gonna start doing like online coaching and tutorials on audio, and I really want to. The next thing that I want to start doing is I really want to help people who want to do what I'm doing figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be doing that in the new year. I'm going to start putting out videos. So drop by the Instagram. It sounds like Zach. Same on YouTube as well. and look for it in the next coming months. And if there's something you want to know how to do, maybe I know how to do it. So just ask me.
100%. I cannot underestimate how talented Zach is in both studio and live. So if you're interested in audio and doing all that sort of stuff, be sure to check it out. And we'll put a link down to Zach's Instagram and all his contact details and stuff, so you can get in touch for that when it does come out. Well, Zach, thank you so much for coming down again. I just said, much appreciate your time.
Man, thank you so much. And I just want to say, I love what you're doing here.
Oh, thank you.
And I love the environment that you're creating, and I love all of the hard work that you do. And I love working in the studio with you. I mean, he's been talking real nice about me all show.
Totally.
But every time I get to come in here and I get to work with you, I love hearing your input. I love working next to you. You always have the best things to say, and you're also super talented. And I appreciate the opportunity to rub shoulders with you.
Thank you, Zachy.
I'm very thankful for that opportunity.
Me too.
So thank you
buddy.
for having me.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an episode. Big thanks to Zach one more time, and we will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much.